have a quick look as we go. Right, so business analytics. You can read this stuff in all the materials and the books, but kind of just to remind ourselves that it's about making better decisions. It's about building data-driven cultures that really are essential to modern day organisations. In terms of definition of analytics, we do tend to still follow Davenport and Harris as the extensive use of data, statistical and quantitative analysis, explanatory and predictive models, and fact-based management to drive decisions and actions. And I think that's the key thing. It's about fact-based management, making better decisions that drive actions, and that's kind of the key thing to it, really. So the main purpose of this session really is just to see if we've got any questions, make sure everybody knows what we're doing, and get prepared for our first intensive weekend in week 5. So just in terms of the structure of the course, it's a 10-unit structure, and we go from an introduction right the way through to the ethical aspects of business analytics, and a whole bunch of stuff in between. And we've got 2 intensive weekends as we go, and I structure those very, very much around the assignment. So the first weekend we focus on assignment 3, the predictive modelling, and the second weekend we focus on the individual assignment, where you get to do some analytics analysis of your organisations. So yeah, learning outcomes. You'll have all this in Moodle and the ebook and everywhere else. So I'm not going to talk us through those. We can if you've any questions, do say. We have got a course textbook which is available on VitalSource. You can get into that via Moodle, and that's of which I'm an author. And you'll meet Sam Kirshner in the first weekend, and you'll meet Felix in the second weekend. So the 3 of us have kind of worked together on, having taught analytics for the last 5 years. We pulled all the stuff together and put it into a book. And I think it's quite nice. We've got a good quote from Thomas Davenport, who is kind of the sort of leading person, as you'll see from when you look at the readings, and if you Google and see who's writing stuff that's influential, Tom Davenport seems to be pretty big. And he was very kind to say that he thought the book was sort of complete, accurate, and up to date, which was rather nice. So that's our kind of reference base for the course, which you can dip into as you go. So I think it's fair to say this is a fairly it's a fairly complicated course to run, because we've got software, and software always it's always tricky with software, because there's always something that goes wrong or doesn't quite work, and the fact we've got 3 or 4 bits of it makes it a bit of a challenge. But we've run it a few times. We know what we're doing with it. If you do have any issues, we will sort them out and we'll get you there. But it does mean that it's a bit more. It's a bit more than just reading a few PDFs. You do have to get hands-on. But having said that, I mean, analytics without doing hands-on, I don't really see the point. You've got to experience it. You've really got to get to do it firsthand. So we've got some really, really good software, I think, on the course. The first bit that you'll probably encounter will be the Harvard online training in regression. So, I mean, a lot of courses that do quantitative methods, they spend the whole 10 weeks, and by the end of it, you've got to regression. So you do a lot of basic stuff, and by the end of it, you can run a regression model. We don't even do that in the course, in the main part. We let you do that as a pre-learning, and then we assume that you understand regression, so that when you come to that intensive weekend, the first one, we can talk about interpreting regression, and we can answer questions about how does it work and what do we do. But we're not there to spend 10 weeks teaching you the basics, and then you leave and you kind of understand regression but not much else. So that's kind of online part of training, and there's about 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours work in there. So it's substantial but not too onerous. The second bit of software that we're using is SAS Visual Analytics, which is SAS is a leading analytics company. Some of you will have come across SAS products in the workplace, and we use that as our sort of day-to-day analytics workhorse. So one of the assignments you do for end of week 3 is just to get into SAS, make sure you can use it and produce your first visualization. The key software, though, that we've got is DataRobot, which is an automated machine learning platform. It is absolutely cutting edge, state of the art. I mean, it's a pretty expensive bit of software, but we get a student license for you, which we pay for. But it gives you access to, I would say, it is absolutely state of the art what's happening with analytics today. So that's a really nice piece of software to use and to understand what you can do with predictive models. So that's kind of the core stuff. You might want to use Excel. You probably will. You might stick the plugin for data analysis, which gives you regression in Excel. I'm not so fussed by that. You've got SAS Visual Analytics. We'll use that for regression. That's a much more. It's actually easier, more intuitive, and more powerful. However, you might use Excel in the assignment when you want to clean up the data set or do a bit of feature engineering, which we'll talk about at the first weekend. We don't cover R, but some of you will have come across software like R and Python. Some of you may have skills there or want to learn them, and you might use that to sort of feature engineer and play with the data sets. But it's certainly not a part of the course in the mainstream. But we will make reference to it because any data scientist that you meet will be using R, or they'll be using Python, because that's part of the data scientist toolkit. So we'll talk about it. I'll probably demo it to you, and but it's not something that I expect you to become familiar with. So quite a bit of software. Assessments. So there are 4 assessments, of which one is participation, and one is the Harvard quantitative methods. So that's assessment 1 and assessment 2. The bulk of the assessment is assessment 3, a predictive modelling assignment, which you do in groups, and that is the focus of the first intensive weekend that we do. The assessment 4 is the individual written report, and that's the focus of the second intensive weekend. So I very much gear what we're doing around these assessments, because these assessments give you the 2 things you need to do, which is how do I do predictive modelling? How do I build my organisation's analytics capability? So those, we can have lots of learning outcomes, but actually those are the 2 things that you need to learn from this course. They're the 2 things you take away that are of value to your business and to your careers as well. So just, I guess, in terms of what do we need? Well, you can see this in the assessment structure. So you've got the weights and the dates and so on. And whether it's individual or group, that's fine. Do familiarise yourself with all the details of the assessments. But in terms of what's coming up, in assessment 1 participation, there are really 2 aspects that you kind of want to look at. The first is that I've set up a forum called NewsHound, which I'll just show you that in Moodle in a moment. And that's it's just a forum for us to, if you find stories that are of the minute, topical, relevant to the course, please post them there. Particularly anything with an ethical aspect, because we want the ethics to go right the way through everything we do, to think about the ethical aspects of what we're doing with data and predictive models. It doesn't mean all the articles have to be on ethics, but it's certainly a good topic. And it does mean that we cover the ethical stuff in a bit more depth, which I think is really important, and is certainly an emerging issue for organisations, individuals, societies and governments.